The sun hit the horizon hard, turning the air into waves of heat that rolled across the forward operating base horizon. Dust lifted from every passing Humvee, clinging to the metal siding of tents and the sweat-soaked fabric of uniforms. It was 2:30 p.m. by local time. Though time hardly mattered here, the base hummed with the restless energy of preparation. Voices clipped over radios, the metallic clank of weapons checks echoing between rows of sand-colored buildings. First Lieutenant Emma Carter wiped a streak of dust from her cheek as she stepped out of the command tent. At 28, she was young for her position, but already known for her precise pattern analysis that had helped map insurgent routes months earlier. Her gear was laid out with the discipline of habit, tactical vest fitted snug, comms secured, M17 sidearm holstered on her right thigh. She pulled the slide back for a press check, saw the gleam of a live round, and nodded to herself. Every detail mattered. Every movement had to be exact. Inside the operations center, screens flickered with satellite imagery. Emma leaned over the table, studying the infrared patterns of potential enemy hideouts. The intercepted communications she had decoded overnight aligned perfectly with the imagery. Confirming her earlier assessment, she sipped from a lukewarm bottle of water and straightened her posture when Captain Robert Hale entered. The base commander's tone carried that mixture of authority and exhaustion common to long deployments. He told her that visiting evaluators were arriving from other branches to assess the upcoming joint readiness drill. They arrived moments later, stepping into the tent in uniforms crisp despite the heat. Major Derek Wilson from Army Intelligence led them, followed by Captain John Mercer of the Marine Corps and Lieutenant Ben Brooks from Air Force Security Forces. Their introductions were polite, professional on the surface, but the glances traded among them told a quieter story. Wilson's smirk lingered too long. Mercer's handshake was firm enough to challenge. Brooks's eyes flicked to her name patch, as if searching for a reason she belonged here. Emma kept her voice even, her posture square, her professionalism unshaken. She explained the structure of the exercise, how live intelligence updates would be fed to operational units in real time. Hale nodded approvingly, but she could feel the evaluator's judgment thicken the air. She had been through this before. Respect earned slower, questioned more. As she gathered her notes and secured her datapad, she caught her reflection in the window calm, centered, steady. Out beyond the wire, the desert shimmered with heat and silence. Something in that silence felt heavier than usual, a sign that the day ahead would not go as planned. The morning came thick with heat and the scent of diesel. Forward operating base horizon stirred before 6:15 a.m., the air alive with motion and static from radios. Mechanics shouted orders over the hum of generators. Humvees lined in rows, waiting for final inspections. The sound of metal slamming into place mixed with the dull thud of M4 carbines being checked and rechecked for readiness. Inside the tactical tent, Lieutenant Emma Carter reviewed the latest satellite updates. The glow from her tablet, reflecting off the laminated maps spread across the table. Tech Sergeant Luis Garcia approached, his voice low, the kind soldiers use when the wrong people might be listening. He told her he overheard Major Wilson laughing with the other evaluators, saying something about teaching her where she belonged before this drill was over. Emma paused, letting his words settle. Her face stayed calm, but her fingers tightened slightly on the radio headset beside her. She told him to double-check the encryption settings on their comms relay, to verify redundancy, and run a test on the backup frequency. Channel Bravo. 3 needed to stay clean and secure. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping fine layers of sand across the landing zone. The Navy SEALs from Team 2 moved through the dust with quiet precision. Their movements were practiced and unhurried. Men who had done this in real combat zones many times before. Commander Jack Reynolds led the team, his gear stripped down to essentials, his demeanor focused. He noticed Emma near the communications tower, clipboard in hand, running through the last checklist. Their eyes met for a moment, and recognition flickered. Months earlier, her analysis had guided one of his missions, saving lives when an ambush was predicted through pattern analysis. He walked over, his tone professional, but carrying weight beneath the surface. He mentioned hearing that the evaluators had a reputation for pushing their limits, sometimes too far, and advised her to stay sharp. She nodded once, thanked him, and went back to her work. Her discipline was her shield. Hair preparation, hair defense. She adjusted her headset, running a test into the mic. Signal check. Channel bravetry. Encryption active. Static answered for a moment before the line cleared, and Garcia's voice came through confirming all systems were stable. The base buzzed around her, everyone focused on the upcoming exercise. But Emma felt something shift in the rhythm of the day. The unease was faint but real, like a vibration in the air. She pushed it aside, turning her attention to the operations board. Protocols, procedures, focus. That was how she would face whatever was coming. The air outside the wire shimmered under the afternoon sun, a pale gold heat pressing down on everything that moved. Lieutenant Emma Carter led the way toward the observation bunker, her boots grinding over gravel and sand. The structure stood half a mile from the main compound, a squat concrete shape against the barren terrain. Behind her, Major Wilson, Captain Mercer, and Lieutenant Brooks followed in silence. The weight of their gear and their intent thick in the air. Sweat rolled down the back of her neck beneath her tactical vest. The radio clipped to her chest gave an occasional crackle of static, the only sound breaking the dry wind. Inside the bunker, the temperature dropped, but the air was heavy, stale with the faint smell of machine oil and dust. Emma unlatched her helmet. Setting it beside the control console, she moved methodically through her checklist, activating the AN divided by PRC 163 radio unit, adjusting the antenna, and confirming the SATCOM uplink alignment. The hum of electronics filled the small space as indicator lights blinked to life. Her voice was steady as she ran the comms protocol. Command Post Alpha. Radio check. Channel bravetry. Encryption active. Static rolled across the speakers. Soft at first, then louder. She adjusted the gain. Checked power. Switched to backup frequency. Still nothing. She frowned and tried again. The second test ended the same way. Major Wilson stepped closer. His tone edged with sarcasm. Looks like your system isn't as reliable as everyone says. Emma ignored him. Resetting the comms interface, Captain Mercer leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Watching her with a smirk, Brooks moved toward the doorway, his shadow blocking out the light. The sound of the heavy steel door sliding shut echoed through the confined room, followed by the sharp metallic click of the lock engaging. Emma turned, every sense alert. Major, open that door. This is not part of the authorized training scenario. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Relax. Lieutenant, we're just testing your ability to handle pressure. Captain Mercer crossed to the console and disconnected the secondary link cable. Cutting off her last line of backup communication, Emma stepped toward her M17 sidearm, strapped to her thigh holster. But Brooks shifted, intercepting her path. You are out of line. Captain, she said, voice low but firm. Stand down and exit the bunker. Her command tone only seemed to amuse them. Massa move first. Snatching the backup radio from her hand and tossing it aside, he made a mocking comment about intelligence officers and their gadgets, his words dripping with contempt. Wilson circled closer, his boots scuffing against the concrete floor. Brooks lunged forward, gripping her arm in an attempt to restrain her. Emma reacted on instinct, her body remembering the training long before her mind caught up. She drove her knee hard into his midsection, pivoted, and followed with an elbow strike to his chin. Brooks stumbled back with a grunt, releasing her. Wilson came in next. Heavier and faster. He shoved her against the console, and her head struck the edge, opening a small cut above her eyebrow. The room tilted for a moment as blood ran warm down the side of her face. Mercer laughed, drawing a tactical knife from his vest. The dull glint of the blade caught the bunker's low light. The gesture broke every regulation of a controlled exercise. Emma steadied her stance, eyes narrowing. Her comms were dead, her support gone, but her training stayed with her. 3 opponents, 1 confined space. Her Pulse steadied. Whatever this was, it wasn't training anymore. She was alone, but she refused to yield. Inside the bunker, the air felt heavier with every second. Captain Mercer turned the tactical knife in his hand. The motion slow and deliberate. The light caught on the blade, sending a flicker across the concrete wall. Lieutenant Emma Carter controlled her breathing. Forcing her pulse into rhythm, she tracked their spacing. The angles of approach, the locations of her sidearm, and the door. The comms were dead. No backup. No one knew. Her mind shifted into survival mode, calculating what she could use, what she could reach, how long she could last. Outside, Commander Jack Reynolds stared at his tactical display. Observation post. Charlie's signal had vanished 2 minutes earlier. He keyed his radio. His voice clipped with command precision. SEAL Alpha 1. This is Commander Reynolds. Comms blackout at Observation Post Charlie. Initiating real-world check. Code Alpha. Static filled his headset before a distant acknowledgement came through. Copy that. Commander. Reynolds glanced toward his team but gauged the distance. It would take the others too long to circle the perimeter. He switched his weapon to live load and started moving alone. He moved low, each step measured, rifle tucked close. The desert wind pressed against his gear as he advanced. His boots made no sound over the sand. At the bunker's perimeter, he crouched, scanning for heat signatures through his visor. 3 inside. 1 stationary. 2 moving erratically. The pattern was wrong for a controlled exercise. He set the rifle against the wall, switched to his sidearm, and gave a silent hand signal to the 2 SEALs catching up behind him. Stack formation. Breach signal ready. Inside, Wilson's hand clamped on Emma's shoulder as Mercer stepped closer. Brooks blocked the only exit. His stance squared. Emma feinted right, then pivoted left. Driving an elbow into Wilson's ribs, he grunted, loosening his grip, and she broke free. Just as Mercer lunged forward, the knife slashed air where her arm had been a moment before. She ducked, kicked the lower console for cover, and caught a fragment of her reflection in a broken monitor. A thin line of blood streaked her forehead from earlier, but her eyes stayed focused. Outside, Reynolds pulled the pin on a flashbang. Breach. The device went off with a concussive crack, a burst of white light filling the narrow bunker. He was through the door in under 2 seconds. Weapon up. Movement seamless. His voice cut through the smoke. Ons visible. Now. Mercer swung instinctively, but Reynolds was faster. He struck Mercer's wrist, the knife clattering to the floor, then twisted him into a disarm position. Brooks rushed forward, and Reynolds drove a knee into his solar plexus, folding him to the ground. Wilson froze for a moment too long. Reynolds had him against the wall in a controlled press, forearm tight against his chest. The commander's breathing was steady, eyes cold and assessing. Lieutenant? Status check. Emma straightened from behind the console, retrieving her M17. Her stance firm. Operational. Commander. Minor injury. Reynolds gave a small nod, keeping his weapon trained on the men. Good. For the record, this entire incident is being recorded on my tactical bodycam. The silence that followed was thick with shock. The air smelled of smoke and oil, the sharp tang of adrenaline still burning in the back of their throats. Wilson tried to speak but only managed a rasp of defiance. Reynolds' reply came calm and even the weight of authority in every word. These men just ended their careers. The line hung in the air like a sentence, final and absolute. As the reality of what had happened settled over the room, the courtroom at Joint Base Andrews was silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning. The U.S. flag stood behind the raised bench, flanked by the insignia of the Air Force and the Department of Defense. Rows of uniformed personnel filled the gallery, their faces tense, their posture rigid. The smell of polished wood and starched fabric hung in the air. It was 9:30 a.m., and the General Court-Martial of Major Derek Wilson, Captain John Mercer, and Lieutenant Ben Brooks was now in session. Lieutenant General Anika Hayes sat in the front row, her uniform immaculate, her expression unreadable. As Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, she had convened the hearing, but, in accordance with military law, she would not preside. On the bench sat a panel of senior officers, while Colonel David O'Neill from the Judge Advocate General's Corps stood at the front, his voice clear and deliberate as he read the charges. Assault on a fellow officer, conspiracy to obstruct an official military exercise, conduct unbecoming of commissioned officers. The words echoed across the chamber, heavy with consequence. The defendants sat side by side, their once-pressed uniforms rumpled, their faces pale. When the lights dimmed for the evidence presentation, the tension deepened. The screen flickered to life, showing the bodycam footage from Commander Jack Reynolds. The images were steady and crisp, the audio unmistakable. Wilson locking the bunker door, Mercer drawing a knife, Brooks grabbing Emma Carter by the arm. The sound of struggle filled the room, followed by Reynolds's breach command and the burst of the flashbang. The playback ended with Reynolds's calm voice, stating that the incident was being recorded for the record. The silence afterward was absolute. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Emma sat at the witness table, her dress uniform flawless, her bearing professional. The scar on her forehead caught the overhead light, a faint reminder of what had happened. When asked to recount the events, she spoke with precision, her voice steady and free of embellishment. Her tone carried neither anger nor pity, only truth. Commander Reynolds followed, testifying with the same quiet authority he had shown that day. His answers were concise, technical, and devastating to the defense. He confirmed the recording, the chain of command, and the protocol breaches that had turned a sanctioned training drill into a criminal act. The verdict came after deliberation that lasted less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. The presiding officer read the sentence with gravity: dishonorable discharge from the United States Armed Forces, forfeiture of all pay and benefits, referral to civilian authorities for prosecution. The sound of chairs shifting in the gallery broke the stillness as military police stepped forward to escort the men away. Wilson turned once, meeting Emma's eyes with a glare full of bitterness. She didn't look away. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited behind a line of military police. General Hayes addressed them first, her tone measured but firm. The events at Horizon Base exposed serious flaws in our evaluation systems. Those will be corrected. The service owes fairness to every man and woman who wears the uniform. When she stepped aside, Reynolds approached the microphones. His words carried without effort. Respect in uniform is not given by gender or rank. It is earned through integrity, through action, through how we treat one another when no one is watching. The cameras flashed as he stepped back, but no one spoke. The crowd felt the weight of his words settle over them. Inside, Emma paused at the base of the steps, looking out toward the morning light. The air was still, the noise of the base distant. Justice had been served, but more than that, something had shifted. For the first time in months, she felt the quiet assurance that what had begun in fear might finally end in change. 3 months after the verdict, the air around the new Joint Special Operations Intelligence Training Center carried a sense of beginning. The facility sat on the edge of a wide training field, its glass and steel buildings bright against the open sky, the hum of generators mixed with the chatter of new recruits moving between classrooms and simulation bays. It was 7:45 a.m., and the day's first lesson had just begun. Captain Emma Carter stood at the front of a lecture room fitted with mission displays, ISR feeds, and digital terrain models. 30 students sat in rows, most of them fresh from officer training, eager but unsure. Many were women, the first to pass through this program since the reforms initiated by Lieutenant General Anika Hayes. Emma's uniform bore the same precision it always had, but her tone carried warmth as she spoke about the core of intelligence work. She told them it was not about rank or software, not even about data. It was about judgment, courage, and the ability to see patterns others missed. She reminded them that the human factor could never be replaced by algorithms, and that truth often came wrapped in uncertainty. As the lesson ended, students filed out, leaving the room quiet except for the soft hum of the projectors. Commander Jack Reynolds appeared in the doorway, relaxed but attentive, a folder tucked under his arm. He nodded toward the empty seats. "Promising group," he said. "Chin and Rodriguez already think like field analysts." Emma smiled, acknowledging it. They reminded her of herself years ago, eager to prove something, but not yet realizing that proof came through patience. She mentioned that change came slowly in institutions, built on tradition. Reynolds agreed, adding that change built from within lasted longer. When the last of the students disappeared down the hall, a young woman lingered, Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, slight and nervous, approached the front of the room. Her voice trembled as she admitted she had almost resigned after a commander once told her that women didn't belong in intelligence. Emma listened without interruption, then placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Intelligence isn't for men or women," she said. "It's for anyone brave enough to see the truth and strong enough to stand by it." Alvarez nodded, her eyes bright, a quiet strength, replacing her uncertainty. Later, as the sun dipped low over the training grounds, Emma stepped outside. Recruits jogged across the field, their cadence echoing through the evening. The light caught the edges of the flag above the main building, turning it gold for a moment, before dusk took it back. The future still carried obstacles, but something had shifted. Change was happening. One lesson, one voice, one day at a time. In the end, Emma Carter's story was not about combat or medals. It was about courage in its quietest form, from the heat of the desert at Forward Operating Base Horizon to the cold discipline of the courtroom, and finally to the calm halls of the training center. Her journey proved that bravery is not measured by firepower or rank. It lives in the moments when someone chooses integrity over fear, when they stand alone because they know what is right. The system she fought within was imperfect, like all human institutions. Yet people like Emma, and those who stood beside her, showed that change can come from inside the walls. Commander Jack Reynolds' discipline and Emma's resolve became proof that leadership is built on respect, not intimidation. Every generation in uniform inherits the responsibility to protect not just the nation, but the values that define its service. Equality, honor, and duty are not just words on a creed. They are actions repeated every day by those who refuse to turn away when wrong is done. The truth is, most battles in life are unseen. They happen in offices, in barracks, in the decisions made behind closed doors. The soldiers who fight them rarely make the headlines, but their victories ripple through the lives of everyone who follows. Emma's story reminds us that respect in uniform, and beyond it, is earned by character, not gender. It asks each of us to remember that justice, like courage, begins small, with a single voice that refuses to stay silent. So when we think of service and sacrifice, we should remember not just those who fight with weapons, but those who fight for honor itself, because the bravest fight is the one for integrity, when no one is watching.